One of the reasons why the prison industrial complex has expanded as it has is because we have learned how to forget about prisons, even if they're in our own neighborhoods, even if we have relatives and friends in prison. And if you look in communities of color, almost everybody knows someone who is there or has been there, but we don't know how to talk about it. We don't integrate ideas about what is going on in these places in our daily conversation. We don't teach about the prison system. It's almost as if what this society does, first of all, is gets rid of the people who have the problems, people who have drug problems, rather than recognizing that they are hurting themselves and they need some help. They need someone to help them. Rather than recognizing that, they just send them to prison. And the majority of women who are in prison are in there in relation to drug-related charges, right? And non-violent drug-related charges. So the idea is just send them to prison, throw them away, get rid of them. And if you get rid of them, then we don't have to think about them. And if we don't have to think about them, then we don't have to think about the problems that they have. So we don't really have to address the issue of drugs, which would require us also to talk about pharmaceutical companies. So I guess what I want to suggest that we all do is figure out ways of making these issues visible. And for people who have relatives or friends in prison, don't be ashamed of it. Because of the way the criminal is constructed, represented, many of us are even afraid to admit that we know someone who could be that kind of a person. But prisoners are like you and me. I mean, yeah, there's some pretty bad people in prison, but there's some pretty bad people who are not in prison. Over 1/3 of all young black men in this country in prison. Now, something is wrong with that. Don't you think? What I want to suggest is that there is a reason why increasing numbers of people of color, and women as well, because ever larger numbers of women are going to prison. There's a lot of real crime, and not only the people who are represented as criminals are the ones responsible for that crime. I mean, we can talk about corporate crime as well. We can talk about crimes against the environment that will affect generations to come. But of course, these people generally only pay fines if they do that, right? How do we create contact between the inside and the outside? Between prison and what prisoners call the free world. Prisoners see us as living in the free world. I don't know how free this world is, because it certainly isn't free for a lot of people who are out here. But at least we can take advantage of the fact that we have the ability to move around in ways that people who are inside don't. As a matter of fact, we can sort of think about the relationship as being the relationship between slaves and abolitionists. Because as a matter of fact, the prison system contains obvious vestiges of slavery. Right? The 13th Amendment abolished slavery for all except those who are being punished for committing a crime. So in a lot of ways, what we see in the penitentiary system in this country is the continuation of the system of slavery. And that is why many of us suggest that what we need during this period is a late 20th century abolitionist movement, as there was a 19th century abolitionist movement the question is creating some new institutions that really will speak to the problems that people have who go to prison. Rather than this prison system which continues to reproduce the problems, for which people are sent to prison. One set of institutions consists of educational institutions. It costs much more to send someone to prison than it does to college or university. And many of those people who are now in prison would do well in an institution like this, would do better than a lot of the existing students. Think about prisoners as human beings who have a right to participate in the efforts that perhaps will lead to change. So I want to suggest the possibility of classes. I used to teach a class on incarcerated women at San Francisco State University. And I took a number of the students from San Francisco State into the San Francisco County Jail because I taught a class at the San Francisco County Jail as well. And one would think that, okay, perhaps the students should teach the prisoners, but I decided to reverse it. I decided that the first phase would be for the students to learn from the prisoners. So the prisoners were positioned as the teachers, and they taught the students about that institution, what went on there, what the problems were.